good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight to join us. My name is Ellie Ambinder. I'm chair of this amazing project called LIZKOR. LIZKOR means to remember. And our mission statement at LIZKOR, which we started this project. I'll get it. About 2.5 years ago, when we realized that we had many members of our congregation who had stories to tell about the participation or their families in the Shoah, which of course is the Holocaust. And so it started because we wanted to make sure that the third and fourth generation, which is my grandchildren and their children, have the opportunity to see and hear the stories from people that lived it, that are still with us. And we're very excited
next time after
that we've done a tremendous amount in terms of bringing stories. So tonight, it is my great honor to present to you Sylvia Gutmann, who is standing right behind me. Sylvia came to America at the end of World War II. She now lives in Framingham, so we're proud to have her here. And in between coming to America at age 7 to today is Sylvia's lifetime. And I'm not going to say anything else except to say to you, it is my privilege to have turned the microphone over to Sylvia, who will tell you her most amazing story.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. My book club, my Shulman resident, my friend, and mostly I'm honored for the young people to be here because they are my future. They are my hope. They will make this a better world. They will put love in the air. I have no memory of the first 7 years of my life. So when I tell you about those 7 years, it's because my beloved late sister Rita told me those stories. She told me who I was and what happened. And what happened is I'm crying, holding out my arms. Mama, Mama, take me with you. It's a French camp. My 34-year-old German Jewish mother and her 3 little girls, I am 3, Susie is 9, Rita is 10, are standing on the roll call in the children's line, and there is a French guard because the French have become aligned with the Nazi regime. I'm crying out to my mother, who has taken her place out of the line because of the French guard who is saying into his megaphone, when your name is called, and there were long tables with lots of people sitting behind the table with lists of names. The camp is located in Rivesaltes, France. We were hiding in Ney, a small village in the south of France, with the hopes of, there were 5 of us, Papa, Mama, me, and Rita, and Susie. And we're hiding in the attic of the family bureau an older woman and her 13-year-old daughter, Madeline. And one day, around July or August, there's a knock on the door. And two French guards are standing outside the door. And Madeline opens the door. And they say, "We know you are hiding Jews. We are here to arrest them." My father is sick in bed. He is bedridden. I believe he probably had something like bronchitis or an upper respiratory illness. And of course, we were non-citizens. We had no papers because Hitler had removed all the citizenship from the Jews. And there was no work, can't do anything without papers. My father had no medicine. We barely had food. We were donated from the small Jewish community in town. And they called for my mother and her family. Papa is bedridden. Mama goes down. I'm in her arms. Rita is there. Susie is there. And we are led down by these two policemen to the town square. Papa is screaming, "Don't take my family! Don't take my family!" And they look around and laugh and say, "Don't worry, we'll come back for you later." The buses are lined up. All the Jews that had been hiding in the village are gathered around. We are boarded on the bus, and Mama is looking out of the window before they put black curtains on the windows. And she sees that Papa somehow has crawled down and is hiding behind a tree. And you're not allowed to speak. And she kind of whispers, "Speak. Gates are up, gates are up. Go back, go back." I don't know how long we were on that bus, but eventually we are put on the train. The train is curtains on the window, blacked out, so that nobody could look out or nobody could look in. And we end up several days later in Camp Riegelsalt. Camp Riegelsalt had been a military camp and is now housing foreign-born Jews and gypsies and homosexuals. It's an September morning. We are sleeping in the children's bunk. We sleep on straw that has filled with lice and smells of urine. Mama comes into our barrack. I'm rubbing the sleep out of my eye because it's very early. And she said, "Children, you have to get dressed, and I will meet you out on the square of the roll hall." My beautiful red-haired mother and the lines were in alphabetical order. And the guard is shouting into his megaphone, "When your name is called, step from the line and walk to the end of the square, which is the size of 2 football fields. Marka Gutmann." Mama steps out of line, has a small bundle of something, and is walking to the end of the square. I run from the line. My 3-year-old arms outspread. Mama, take me with you. Take me with you. She turns around and she says to her children, I will be back soon, my loves. Go back to the barrack. Mama, I'm coming with you. I'm coming with you. She turns to Rita, my 10-year-old sister. Rita, promise me you will take care of the baby. And with that, they take her away from me. They don't even let me get near her. And 4 days later, my beautiful red-haired, green-eyed, 34-year-old mother is gassed in Auschwitz. I walk back to my sisters. We go into the barrack. We're the only children left there. All the children, 250 young children, went on that cattle car and were not allowed to grow up, to become lawyers or rock stars or mothers or fathers or aunts or uncles. I don't know how long we were in the barrack. But maybe a week or two later, a woman came to the barrack. She didn't tell us her name, and she said, I will take you out. And I later found out her name was Mademoiselle Rothschild, and she had probably paid off the Vichy Guard, and she took us back to Papa, who was now in hiding in Otzi, very ill, and living kind of in an old hotel in the mountains. I think we stayed for about 5 days until Papa said, I cannot take care of my children. And he got in touch with Mademoiselle Rothschild, whose family was also living in Ney. And she came back. She was 19 years old, working for the underground. And she took us back to Ney. And 2 weeks after that, we left the Bohos again. And we were bicycled. I think she put us on a train, actually. And we went to a farmhouse in Altsy. One day, and we are the only children in this farmhouse. And one day, 3 people on bicycles, wearing masks, milk cans hanging from their shoulder, dressed as farmers, come to take us out. They bicycle us to the border of Switzerland. I am now almost 4 years old. They leave us alone. It's nighttime. And the little house where the border guard sits lights up. And Rita says, I heard a shout. Who goes there? And the big light goes on. And he comes out of his guardhouse. And he sees these 3 little girls. I must tell you that in 1943, Switzerland had closed its borders. Every Jewish refugee that had fled was turned back and perished. And he looks out and he sees this little girl with a very red face. I have a high fever, and he calls his wife, who comes and orders an ambulance. And they take me away, and that is how we got into Switzerland. We just said, we want to go to Zurich. We have an aunt there, Papa's sister Rosa. I am ambulanced to a sanatorium. I have diphtheria. I don't see my sisters for 2 years. I live in this sanatorium run by the Catholic nuns. And 2 years after that, 2 years I'm there, and then I am sent to my Tante Rosa. Rita lives with her family. Susie lives with a kind, gentle volunteer, Frau Broccoli. Tante Rosa was not a very nice woman. And in secret, one day, she shipped me to a mountain family. And 1 year later, I am found by a social worker because I have been abused and hungry, and I'm sitting alone on the railroad tracks. And for the rest of the time that we were in Switzerland, I lived with that social worker. The social worker was kind and wonderful, and she gave me a dog. And I am 7 years old, and that was my first memory. I am on a ship, a crowded, horribly smelling boat, fish. Thousands of people are speaking languages that I don't understand. There are 4 decks. We sleep on the lower deck, not in beds, in hammocks, 3 to a row. Rita is top, I'm in the middle, and Susie is the lowest. Took many years for Susie to forgive me for having peed in my bed every night. It was a very, very rocky ship, rocky waters. And I'm walking alone on the deck every day, holding my doll. She's 2 feet tall. She's wearing a satin black and white dress. She has real hair, I thought, and real looking eyes. And I love her because I'm her mommy. And every day, holding my doll, I walk around the ship, and every lady that looks at me with kind eyes, I say, will you be my mommy? Will you please be my mommy? And I did that until I was 13 years old. We land in New York. There is a longshoreman strike, and we're not allowed to get off the ship. And 1 week later, I see a tugboat being hauled up on the outside ladder. And there's a bald man who is calling out our name. We raise our hands. It's us. This is Sylvia and Rita and Susie. And he walks over and in German says, hello, I'm your Uncle Sam. And he's holding a basket in his hand. And he takes out of the basket a wrapped gift. And he places it in my hand. And it has this funny, crinkly paper, which I now know is wax paper. And I open the paper, and there are 2 slices of white bread, and in the middle is mayonnaise and tomatoes. And I start to eat, and I've never tasted anything so delicious. It's all over my face, all over my clothes. And he's laughing, and he quickly gives me another piece. Of course, I love him right away. And soon the longshoreman strike is over. We are allowed to get off. And Daddy Sam, I immediately call him Daddy Sam. My Uncle Sam takes us home. Susie goes to 180th Street with Tante Bella, Papa's sister. I and Rita go to Gertie and Sam. 645 West 160th Street. Daddy Sam leads me on a small tour of the apartment, which I thought at the time was so big. And when I revisited it 5 years ago, it was so tiny. And he opens up the light in this one room, and this little tow-haired boy is rubbing his eyes from sleep. And he reaches out his hand, and his name is Michael, and he's 4 years old, and I have been welcomed. Daddy Sam loves me. Aunt Gertie, not so much. I will give you a couple of examples. It was a tough, well, first of all, I had no childhood. That had been ripped away from Hitler. I was deeply traumatized when I arrived. Uncle Sam, my mother's favorite brother, had fled Germany early on. His wife Aunt Bertie was also a Holocaust survivor and had lost her entire family in Berlin. I started school. I had never been to school, and they automatically put me into second grade, and I can never catch up. But I do love English, and I learned it right away. I think probably not only do I love the language, but I think I just like to hear myself speak. And every morning, before I leave for school, I put my baby girl, my doll, on my hand-me-down bed. And when I come home, I always go immediately to my girl, my little girl, and tell her, Mommy's home. And I practice my English on her. And one day, I come home from school, and she's not there. She's not sitting on my bed. And I look everywhere. Where could she be? And I'm looking under the bed. And suddenly, I hear Aunt Gertie behind me. And she says, You looking for that doll? That old doll? I threw her away. I promised I would protect her. I promised her I would take care of her. And I didn't. I didn't let her see me cry because she'd always threaten, You're crying? I'll give you something to cry about. And that was a moment that I have never, ever forgotten because it was very, very, it lasted all my life. It was a feeling that I wasn't wanted. I didn't belong here. I was a nuisance, another mouth to feed. It was a lonely childhood. Thank God for Rita. But 2 years later, after sleeping on a couch in the living room and drinking a cup of coffee, if anything, in the morning, Rita went to work. And once she started working, they asked her to pay rent. And she left because up until then, the highest was paying for us. She left and got an apartment with another orphan that she met on the ship. And I had lost my strongest ally. I had lost my best friend. And when she was 19 years old, she went to Cleveland, Ohio to visit an aunt, another one of Papa's sisters. And Ella, without Rita knowing, had arranged for a young survivor that she knew to be there. Rita is 19, beautiful, beautiful Rita, has red hair like Mama. green eyes like Mama. Looks like Papa, actually. And she sees a young man wearing a Navy uniform walking up the hill to the house. Maybe it was love at first sight. I know it was for Jack. Maybe for Rita as well. And they get married. And Gertie will not buy me the ticket. She will not buy me the clothes. Rita and Susie chip in, buy me a plane ticket, buy me the dress, and I fly to Cleveland, Ohio. Rita is a fairy princess. White dress, veil. Aunt Winnie, Jack's foster mother, has paid for everything. Rabbi Silver, almost our ambassador to Israel, presides at the wedding. And every woman, I would sit on their lap and say, will you be my mommy? Will you be my mommy? I'm 13 years old. I'm 19 when I leave the climates. Sam is ill. He has dragged his legs. He can no longer go to his workshop on 72nd Street. He is a furrier and has a fur salon. Gertie needs to learn how to drive. And I become a hairdresser. I quit high school, and like my sister Rita, I become a hairdresser. And every week, I go to the Climans to cut and set Gertie's hair. I am 26, and my sister Rita has been bugging me since I'm 17. You're going to be an old maid. You're going to be an old maid. You need to settle down, Sylvia. I'm 26, walking my dog on McDougal Street, where I live now, and I see a handsome stranger with silver hair walking toward me. What a cute dog, he said. And 8 days later, I married a stranger. Nothing rash, really. I'm dreaming of family of my own, a baby, the white picket fence around the White House, the geranium boxes in the windows. It will be a fairy tale. I did get the baby. Nothing else. And 7 years later, I'm a single mom, working in Doctor's Hospital across the street from Gracie Square. It's always, no matter how many times I tell this story, there are points in the story that are so relevant, which is so wonderful that young people are here, because because you're my witness. And today you're hearing this story from me, but one day you will have to tell this story for me. After all, I'm 85, almost 85 years old. I'm a single mom. I take a 3-month course with Gibbs, and I pass myself off as a secretary. I can neither type nor do step, but I listen very well. I'm working for the assistant controller of the hospital. My real job is that every time his wife calls, I am to tell her that he's in a meeting because he's on a 3-hour lunch break and comes back plastered. And one day, I'm looking out of the window of my office, and there's an old elderly man pacing the lobby, looking very agitated. And I open my door and I walk over and I ask, "Can I help you?" And he leads me to the beautiful waiting room in the lobby. And we sit on the brocade couch because this hospital looked like a hotel. You didn't go there if you were sick. You went there to dry out, to have a plastic surgery. But anything serious, more serious, you don't go to doctors. You didn't go to doctor's hospital. And he tells me that he feels guilty and sad that he has agreed to let his wife have shock treatments there. And as he leaves to go home, back to work, and he tells me that he found it as a young man, and that is really when he comes alive, that as a young man, he founded a lingerie company when he was 25. He is now 75. The next morning, and before he leaves, he asks the doorman to get him a taxi, and he wants to give the doorman a tip. And he reaches into his pocket, and he forgot his wallet. And he asked me if I could lend him $5. I had just that morning cashed my paycheck. And like I do every month, I have little brown, light brown, beige kind of envelopes. And this one is rent. This one is my son's therapy. This one is a movie or an opera. I could never do both. And this one is for gas and electric. And I give him $5. And off he goes. The next morning I come back to work. And there is a long white box on my desk from Milton H. I open the box, and there are 24 red roses, long-stemmed red roses. And in one of the roses is a $100 bill that says, "Thank you." Oh, this is a rich dude. Yes, indeed. He comes every day, and he seems to time it around my lunch hour. And every day he brings a basket of prepared food by his private chef in his lingerie company, which has an outpost on Fifth Avenue and 34th Street. Showroom. That night, I am home, and the lobby of my apartment is filled with brown boxes, plants and flowers and brown boxes from his lingerie. The nightgowns are stunning because I'm so used to sleeping in an old sweatshirt and some raggedy pants. And that scene is repeated every night. And the doorman of my building, the elevator man, they had those in those days, points to all the boxes. And he said, "These came for you." And by now I know that everyone in the building has known they came with a chauffeur. He is relentless. He's somebody rich enough to know that he gets everything he wants. And his courtship is relentless. And finally, I agree, after the 7th night, to have dinner with him. He sends a stretch limo. I'm wearing my only barely sized 12 dress. My son is dressed in hand-me-down corduroy pants and a hand-me-down blue jacket from his cousins. We're sitting in the back giggling. And he takes us to the Plaza Hotel. This really is a dream. And how ironic that my favorite fairy tale that I told my 2 cousins, who became my brothers when I was adopted, I told them fairy tales every night. And my favorite fairy tale was always Cinderella. And someday my prince would come. But here he sits, fat, old, wrinkled, and 75 years old. We have a relationship. His daughters, grown daughters, 3 grown daughters, thank me for making their father as happy as they've ever seen. He gives me love. He cares. I walk into the room, you would think I walked on water. I'm the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. He loves me so much. And 5 years later, his wife dies. We found out only years later that she had agoraphobia, and those shock treatments didn't do anything to help her. They didn't know about that disease. He tells me to come to the showroom which I did every afternoon to go out for lunch. I'm sitting in the waiting room. He comes out, and there are 5 little jewel boxes on the table. Pick one, he said. I open the boxes. Diamond rings, all shapes, and I choose the emerald cut. It's about 2 carats. Perfect diamond. We plan to marry. He wants to get married right away. No, I say. Milton, we can't do that. We have to wait a year. At the funeral, his best friend Carl comes over to me. I'm sobbing. What kind of schlemiel are you, he says, to make an 80-year-old man wait a year? I could have been living on my favorite street, Park Avenue South, in a 10th floor, 5-bedroom apartment overlooking Central Park. I'm lost. I have lost. He was like a mother, father, child, best friend for me. Who will I be now? I'm back to Cinderella. I won't tell you about all of them, but I was married 4 times. Handsome, charming, nothing up here. They're like pretty packages. They're like the packages that my Milton sent to the lobby. But when you open them, there's nothing there. I was very dysfunctional. I had never been diagnosed. I remember saying to Aunt Gertie one time, I was working in a beauty shop. I think I need therapy. And she said, what? You don't know any other best way to spend your money? I chose people in my life that were, instead of being like Daddy Sam, loving and kind and gentle, I chose men that were like Aunt Gertie, cruel and distant and not loving. Every summer, I would take my son to my sister Rita in Cleveland, Ohio, because I couldn't afford proper care for him in the summertime. And she would say, bring baby David. She called him baby David. She'd still call him baby David, and he's 54 years old. If she were alive. And I'd bring him to his Aunt Rita, and she'd keep him for the summer so that I could go back to work. And in 1989, I am now living in San Diego. My son is in the Guitar Institute in Los Angeles. And every day I call my sister Rita, who has, with her family, been able to convince her husband to sell the deli, Jack's Deli, and move to Florida. The winters in Cleveland, Ohio are brutal. And they buy a condo in North Miami Beach. And every day she would go and play cards with the girls, anywhere from 50 to 80, and sit around and get a suntan and swim in the pool and do the swimming exercises, the pool exercises. And every day I call her from San Diego, and she starts to tell me that she doesn't play cards anymore. Oh, okay. And then the next week, she tells me she forgot her wallet when she was in the bagel shop. And I make all kinds of excuses for that seems normal. And when she tells me she forgot to put soap suds in the washing machine, I tell her, oh, I do that sometimes. I just want to normalize it because as long as she gets really excited when she tells me I don't go out anymore because the sun hurts my eyes. But when she tells me her middle son, Mark, came to visit her, he is an attorney in New York, an entertainment attorney, that she went to introduce him to her neighbor and she forgot his name. And I cannot find a normalcy there. I'm alarmed. I call the real estate person that sold me the townhouse, sell my house. I go to Miami, Florida. Miami Beach. I take my son, my dog Elmo, my Doxy, and I see Rita. Every Friday night, I bring the hollow. She makes the chicken soup, the one that I like with the feet, so that I can suck the fat off. I don't do that anymore. I'm kind of like a hypocrite vegan. And I noticed that when she's walking toward me with that beautiful smile that lights up her entire body when she sees me, she's dragging her leg. And 1 year later, she's using a cane. And 6 months later, she's in a wheelchair. And 1 year later, she's bedridden. Her family, sisters are not included, her daughter, her husband, her son, her oldest son, make the decision to send her to a nursing home. It's horrible. I go every day. It smells of urine and that cleaner, the one that smells like pine. Patients are sitting in wheelchairs, food dripping down, screaming for help, and the aides are sitting in the TV room watching TV. And every night I feed my Rita and others that are screaming for help. One year later, she's finally moved to a nicer nursing home. She has forgotten how to eat and swallow. And again, her family, I'm not included, makes the decision to have a feeding tube put in. And every day, I go to see my sister. And on Saturdays, I often bring my little radio so we can listen to the Metropolitan Opera on the radio from New York. Her eyes light up when Carmen plays. I remember she told me when I was younger that it was Papa's favorite opera. He was a huge opera lover. He always sat in the nosebleed section. And sometimes she would tell me, and she'd always start crying. I was 5 years old. She wore a pink dress, and I went with Papa to the opera. It's excruciating to see her little shriveled body in a feeding tube. She has no life. And 6 months later, while I'm sitting there and we're listening to the opera, a new doctor comes into the room. He has red hair, and he says, I'm going to tell the family we need to remove this feeding tube. She will never get better. She has no life. We need to let her go. And I know that if the doctor says to Jack, we need to do this, he will. The next day I come and there's no more feeding tube. And I wrap my sister in my arms. And I put a blanket on her and on her a wheelchair, a bed chair kind of thing. And I wheel her outside. I want her to feel the sun on her face. And I take her head and I point it up to the sky. And I say, Mama, Papa, home. And 8 days later, my 61-year-old sister dies. I don't go to her funeral. I don't want to see her buried in the ground because I know she's in heaven. Because I saw a butterfly on the windowsill the day that she died. And I knew that she was going to fly away. And I told her, I love you, Rita. I am so proud and happy and grateful that you were mother to me. You were my person. You were my place. I always knew I had a place to run to whenever a relationship broke up. She loved me unconditionally. And I was so grateful that I now could mother her. I fled back to New York. I rent a small apartment from a friend. And I'm waiting on the street corner. It's March 4th, 1994. To go to a job interview at a hotel on Fifth Avenue. And I'm waiting for the light to change. I'm already late. I slipped on the ice. My one coat is dirty. My black stockings have a hole in them. And I'm looking down the street, and there is a FedEx truck rolling down the street. And I'm suddenly tired. I'm tired of living. I'm tired of fighting to live. My sister is gone. My Milton is gone. My daddy Sam is gone. And I want to die. And I step off this curb, wanting the truck to just make it go away. It's a sudden thought. I hadn't premeditated it. And I hear a voice. And there's nobody on the street. And it says, stop. And I run back to that little dark apartment. And I lay in a fetal position, crying for my sister. But I know I need help. And I call the only number that I remember from when I lived there, because I had called it many times to have a camp for my son. Good morning, UJA Federation, may I help you? My mother's gone, my father's gone, and I want to die. And this soft, gentle operator, who I never met, says, promise me you won't harm yourself, and I will have somebody call you right away. Three minutes later, the phone rings. Sylvia, my name is Dr. Weinberg, Milton Weinberg. I am a psychotherapist, and I am in charge of a Holocaust survivors group. And I want to see you in my office tomorrow. I have no money, I have no job, I can't pay you. I'll see you in the morning. And for $5 a session, because Jewish Federation paid the $250 that he charges, I saw Dr. Weinberg 4 times a week. 1 year later, I graduate. He is the first person to call me a little child. How can that be, I say to him. I'm 54 years old. He said, no, you're 3, and you can come out of hiding now. And I made a promise the day that I left his office that I would never be silenced again, that I would share my story wherever. I would live out loud and not small. I would honor my parents. And I begin the journey. I'm 62 years old when I fly to Berlin, Germany. I am the survivor on a group, 200 young university students from America, 200 university students from across Europe. It is called the Journey of Hope and Remembrance. We will visit all the death camps. I am one of the 8 survivors on each bus. I am asked to speak at Auschwitz in front of the bombed out 4th gassing places. The rest had been bombed. I'm standing on the stage looking out at all these students. And I say, this is sacred ground. You will see the blood and the bones of the people that perished, my father and mother included, in the soil. Their ashes are floating on the water. And I meet a young man. He's a 22-year-old student. And he begs me to have me give my number to him. And every day, this poor student calls me back in America. And one day he said, please come to my university and speak and share your story. It is September 10th, 2001. I take a plane to Berlin, Germany. I land on September 11th. I have rented a little apartment from Ivanka, a friend of his, who is supposedly on vacation for a week. But she's there, and the television is on. And I'm watching what I think is a Superman movie because there are planes flying into the Twin Tower. And there's a German voice in the background. And I think this is a dubbed American film. And suddenly, Yannick screams in English. There's no Superman. And the Twin Towers are being struck by terrorists. We all remember where we were that day. But for me, a survivor, an American Holocaust survivor in Berlin, Germany, the country that I loathed and the people that I loathed and was afraid of, it was tragic. I want to go back to New York. I want to help. But all the airports are closed. I cannot leave. And the following day, I see in the town square people with posters, German people with posters. We are all American. They are holding vigils. I'm signing a guest book. And 1 week later, President Bush invades Afghanistan. Was it Afghanistan or Iraq? I think it was whatever. One of them. And the posters now show Bush with a Hitler mustache. And they're marching. No more war. No more war. I can't leave. And I hear another voice. It is the voice of my sister, who always told me about her life with Papa and Mama in Berlin. And I think I will stay. And Yannick says, let's have you speak. And we take out the phone book. I don't speak German. And he looks at all of the universities and the Oberschules and the high schools. And we pick names, and I have him translate a letter to the principals of the schools saying, I am an American, my name, I would like to share my story. And my only need is that the students speak English, which is very relevant in Germany because it is the second language. I'm standing at the desk. I'm surrounded by 100 young high school students, about 17 years old. They're sitting with their arms crossed very aggressively. And I feel like I'm the cigarette and the bomb that's going to go off. I feel the tension in the room, and it frightens me. I have never talked to a German. My sisters both spoke German, but never to each other anymore. My daddy Sam and Aunt Gertie, they spoke German. They were German Holocaust survivors. They never spoke German. They spoke Yiddish when they didn't want us to understand anything. I'm looking at these students. I'm so scared. And I walk around the room and I take their hand and I thank them for coming. And I feel the air lighten up. And I begin to tell my story. Your ancestors murdered my parents. I have lived without a mother and a father. And at the end, I talk about 45 minutes. The room is silent. And I'm afraid that they're angry with me now. I'm almost afraid that somebody is going to come and attack me. My heart is beating. I can almost feel like it's coming out in the room. I feel like they can hear it. And 3 minutes later, I hear 100 chairs sliding back. I hear the rustle of people standing up. And they give me, with tears in their eyes, a 10-minute standing ovation. I live in Berlin for 5 years. I come back to America. I lived in New York, and I now live in Framingham. When I first came to Framingham, I thought I had landed on the moon. Framingham. Wait, I thought this was Boston, because my best friend lives in Boston. And she took me around, and I thought this was Boston. Well, it's here, and I love being here. And I love being in this evening with you. And I love and am grateful that you came out on this horrible evening just to hear my story. And today, they call me resilient. They call me powerful. I've been called worse. And you know what? I don't need a man to make me whole anymore, because I am my own prince. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I take it early. I'm not going to talk too long. But I say that every time. Well, bye, Judy, darling. Thank you for staying.
We have time. Well,
Maybe.
first you have to give us a little while to get our breath back. And then we have time for
My book group. My Beth Amber.
this is the book in
My
case
book
anybody in the world hasn't read it. Sylvia will answer some questions.
You don't even have to ask questions, you can comment. I want to hear from you. I want to know about your doubts, your fears, your hope.
After reading the book, I am still stunned by all the people who helped you and your family to escape. And I'm wondering, you mentioned that while you were in France, while your family was housing you in France, they came and took you. And I'm wondering, did any of those people who were helping you suffer any repercussions as well, as if you did that?
Mademoiselle Rothschild, we were in contact a lot when I lived in Berlin. She died 2 years ago. She had no repercussions. But I found out recently that actually she never worked alone. And oh, the most important thing I forgot to tell you. Why did my mother leave me that day when nobody else's mother did? There was a young nurse working in the camp. Her name was LIZKOR. She came from Strasbourg, and she was working for the OZE. And every night she would go, she was the children's nurse for the children's barracks. She would go to the adult barracks. There were no men in the barracks. The men were farther away. And she would tell the women, don't take your children tomorrow. Leave them with me, and I will keep them until you come back. And that woman, I went to Israel in 2007 to meet LIZKOR. She was 83 years old, and she gave me a picture. She doesn't know how the camera was brought into the camp because that wasn't allowed. But one of the children had brought this camera in, and there are 5 rows of children, all ages. The youngest are on the floor, then and the tallest are in the back. And she asked me to look at the picture, and it's very old and grainy. And actually, that picture had been sent earlier by my friend Cornelia Partman, who was filming me in the hopes that she could get it on TV. It never did go on TV anyway. And she sent me this on my computer, and she told me to look at it. And I said, what? I said to myself, why has she there's no text, just the picture. And she makes me look at the picture. And I stare, and suddenly I see my sister Susie on the top level. Then I see my sister Rita behind. What I see is me. It is camp result, the day my mother was deported. My eyes look dead, sad, lost. And Liesl Hanau is 83 years old. I knock on the door in that old people's home where she lives in Israel, in Jerusalem. I hear nobody come, so I turn the knob, I open the door, and this little white-haired woman comes walking toward me, saying, Sylvie, Sylvie. I'm crying so hard. I'm holding her so tight that her hearing aid goes off. Her glasses are all wet now from my tears. And I say, you saved my life. You saved my life. How do you tell somebody that you're alive because of what they did? She died a year ago. We were in constant contact. So, life is a gift. It is not a given. Live it loud. Live it well. Be kind. Give back. Live with joy. Wherever you can grab it. Very joy. Questions? I want a comment from one of the young people, please. Come on. Yes.
My name's Hannah. I'm 14, and I just want to say thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I think it's really important that we know other people's stories about the Holocaust, and just thank you so much for coming and sharing it with us.
You're a witness.
And this is the reason we're doing this program, right here. 14-year-olds. What an experience, Sylvia, that they get to talk with you and hear your story from your lips and your message. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, my dear.
I said, maybe 40 minutes I'll talk.
Yeah, that's what she told me. It's okay. Nobody's leaving so fast.
Thank you for staying. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia.
You're blessed.